have lived in your home for over 15 years, it's time to remodel your bathroom. For a virtual or in-home appointment, call 800-826-9895. That's 800-826-9895. 800-826-9895.
WCPT replay.
I hear a lot of people saying that they hate Illinois. They hate Cook County. They literally, you can just see the passion and the anger when they talk about that. I can't wait to move away. And everybody talks about getting out of the state, and I'll be honest with you, I love it here. But yet our house is still a seller's market. There's still more people that want to move in than are moving out. I mean, so many people are leaving our state. Then wouldn't the buyers have more power?
A lot of it has to do with how people identify. People's identity, the things they most cherish. And if you identify as someone who is conservative, you will look at some of the legislation that's been passed, pro-LGBTQ, pro-DEI, whatever other buzzwords that people on the right side of the political spectrum like to point at that are, to them, that are negative values that our government and the majority of our people find enough value in it to protect it, abortion rights, whatever it is.
Keep listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Let's go. And coming to you from the basement, not the basement of the basement, we found the key to the stairs upstairs. It is the Sports Cubicle, the fastest moving 2 hours in sports talk radio. So let's get down to our Steam panel. And I think you actually take the record. You beat the Paulish one for once. Marvelous. You're the farthest distance of travel today.
Yeah, I'm the steamed one. That's right.
And on Paulish, you are a second furthest travel in here.
Yeah, I got to hurry up. I got an interview with the Bears and the Raiders after today.
Just the Bears and the Raiders. Come on, Paul.
The Jags and the Jets aren't interested in me.
And Mercado, he's going to the Jags and the Jets because what do they do other than waste the greatest potential talent they ever have?
And we won't be doing it on Zoom. We will be doing it in person, unlike the Chicago Bears. It's been a crazy week in the NFL. We have the NFL playoffs. We've had all these different coaching searches going on. We had a coaching hire break before we get into the studio. But before we get to all that, we want to make sure everybody's interactive. We are live right now on WCPT 820 here in Chicago, as well as the Sports Cubicle's YouTube channel. So check us out right there as well. Call and text us at 773-763-9278 or send us an email at sportscubicle@gmail.com. So what do you guys want to talk about first? What do we want to do? Do we want to head to Hallows Hall, or do we want to see actually good football or what should have been good football in the NFL playoffs? Dealer's choice. How do you guys want to handle the first few minutes? Because I feel like the NFL playoffs have been much more entertaining than the coaching carousel, because the coaching carousel has just been a lot of noise, a lot of hot air, because a lot of things can happen until teams are eliminated, until the second and third interviews. But the NFL playoffs have delivered somewhat. We've seen Lamar Jackson put up an MVP performance. We've seen Josh Allen put on an MVP performance. We're seeing a rematch from Brazil between Philadelphia and Green Bay. The Texans ruined a lot of people's brackets by actually showing up after a horrendous last few weeks by CJ Stroud. So I think where I want to start with, is there anything that we've seen in these playoffs right now that is a common denominator of what you believe the winner should look like? Because to me, it's come down to this: good coaching, time management, game script, and then health has been the biggest thing in these playoffs right now. You saw teams that have been decimated by injuries are right now trying to get healthy, like a Detroit Lions. But I think a team like Buffalo, the best thing that happened to them was being able to wrap up that division, get a little bit of rest last week, and then have home games up until you have to go to Kansas City. The entire season for the Buffalo Bills, who I think right now are the front in mind because they're the ones who just played. I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, the best case scenario would have been all your games in Buffalo. But being able to take care of home field and doing what you're supposed to, there's a huge gap between the Denver Broncos and the Buffalo Bills. I like Bo Nix. There's a huge gap between Josh Allen and Bo Nix. And if you look at those type of scenarios, the best thing to happen to Buffalo was they took care of business at home. They, for the most part, got out healthy. That is the best case for a team that I think has the biggest uphill battle, where they have to take care of their Goliath in the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what I was most interested in the first few games we've seen of the wild card weekend. Paulie, was there a game that interested you that you saw where you're like, oh, Okay, that was a little interesting. I didn't expect this team to come up that way.
Well, it would have been Ravens and Steelers, but I don't have Amazon Prime, so I didn't get to see that game at all. But Chargers and Texans, I think a little bit of a surprise from what we thought. We thought the Chargers were the hotter team going into it. I guess you could have gone either way. Maybe the Chargers were a little bit of frauds or just caught off guard, or Texans were sleeping the last few weeks. But that game struck a little bit of interest to me. But shame on me for also thinking that Justin Herbert is a great quarterback. I listen to that hype all the time. And I think in that game, throwing 4 picks is never a good thing. That one was the most interest to me. But at the same time, I feel like you play that game maybe in LA, you roll the dice, maybe play that game 9 more times, and LA probably wins a few more times, rather than what the outcome was in the one game that they played, which was Houston, kind of controlled that game from late second half on. And, they could have gone either way, but Houston was the better team yesterday.
I think, Houston ended up being the better team. I would argue that even with Justin Herbert having the 4 interceptions, the Chargers are not there without Justin Herbert to begin with. And I think this is a great point that you highlighted, whether or not you believe in the hype of any quarterback or not. The importance of your QB, if they go out there and they lay an egg, it doesn't matter how good your defense is. It doesn't matter if you have somebody like Saquon Barkley. If Jalen Hurts isn't able to get to the ball to his playmakers, that's what the NFL has become. That's why Detroit is so dangerous. Their entire defense is on the IR.
Well, 12 points is disappointing and 4 picks.
Yeah, immensely disappointing. But this is why it's important. And I think when you saw that big play to Lad McConkey, right, where you're attacking the top of the defense. You're trying to attack the secondary. You're attacking the middle of the field. What do you think Detroit does better than anybody? Detroit sends Jameson Williams like, just keep going. Or you have Amon-Ra St. Brown taking care of the soft part of the defense. That is what the NFL is now. That's what makes these teams dangerous. That's why it doesn't matter what Philadelphia does. If you're not able to get to the ball to Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, it doesn't matter how good Saquon Barkley is. Now, he might have one of those games where he's just unstoppable, but that you put 8 in the box, and all of a sudden now you're having your quarterback have to beat somebody. And I think that's why, for me, the Buffalo game was interesting, because Josh Allen had the ball on a dime. What he did with that Ty Johnson play, like there's so much interest. And again, here being Chicago, I watch everything with perspective. How far are the Bears? How far are they from having this or that, or the division itself? How's the NFC North looking compared to these other teams? Because we hype it here in the Midwest. But what happens if Philadelphia goes ahead and beats Green Bay today? What if Minnesota loses in the first round after winning all these games? What if Detroit the health finally catches up to them? So, Barbara, what did you see so far in the wildcard weekend, the games we have seen, that has kind of piqued your interest early on in the NFL playoffs?
Yeah, well, chalk held, and there was the closest game was a 2-touchdown game, the 28-14 win of the Ravens over the Steelers. And I thought the Steelers might perform a little bit better, but as far as the Chargers, it was 32-12, so that turned out to be no contest. And the Bills over the Broncos, 31-7. So there was no mystery at the end of any of these games. And it wouldn't have helped the Chargers if they'd been awarded a home game, because they wouldn't have played one, just like the Rams aren't going to, unfortunately. But in terms of the Jim Harbaugh mystique, I thought maybe he'd be able to beat the Texans, who were much like in the NFC. You've got some divisional champs that don't have outstanding records. And that's why I thought there might be a possibility there. And it should be interesting. More interesting. Now, AFC's done. It's all set up. You got Lamar Jackson versus Allen for a rematch. By the way, you may recall that Baltimore won 35-10 the first time at the end of September. So it will be a revenge match. And sometimes it's tough to beat somebody twice in a year anyway. But in terms of the NFC, we got our NFC power teams, 2 of which are on the road, with better records than the team they're playing. So it should be interesting to see what happens in the NFC, because the Vikings and Rams are going to have a neutral field game, essentially, in Arizona tomorrow. So, I mean, I thought the Vikings would win that one anyway. So I think the NFC might be a little bit more interesting, because it's got to be, because there was no contest in the AFC really. And, unfortunately, I was able to see the Steelers Ravens thanks to my local bar, so I didn't have to worry about streaming it.
So I'm glad you brought it up, Marber, because this is the new generation of the streaming, right? Like, we're seeing the Netflix games, we're seeing the Amazon games, we're seeing the NFL at its peak right now, even though, oddly enough, some of the ratings have been down on over the air television, but that's a different conversation for a different day, because right now, Marvin, you brought up the big point of Lamar and Allen, Stroud, Mahomes. The common denominator is great quarterback play. I don't think Houston Texans you would have thought if it wasn't for CJ Stroud playing the game that he did. And obviously you had Justin Herbert struggle the way he did, it wouldn't have been that outcome. But Devin, obviously all of us on social media saw what you were wearing. Bo Nix, you were all in on Bo Nix and Sean Payton. Shout out Sean Payton. You believed. It didn't work out that way. What interested you in the wild card weekend?
File this under teams that Devin went all in on in the playoffs that just didn't quite make it, like Washington football team. What do you mean a single time? You're wearing a Bo Nix shirt.
Show the people on YouTube. Make sure you guys are here on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle. What did you think about the wild card weekend?
I mean, definitely a bit of a surprise here. Blowouts I was not expecting at all. You definitely see a lot of these teams that really were performing quite well most of the season here. I mean, definitely, I literally texted all of you last night saying, I'm like, oh, Texans just blew our entire bracket here because no one saw them, especially in the blowout fashion they did there. I still want to see, I'm like, is this CJ Stroud having the Patrick things once the playoffs come in? He hits the switch and he finally remembers who he is. Different story here. Again, this might be fun. Maybe this will be a team that stops the Chiefs for once. I don't know. It's definitely one of those interesting things. I do like what Marver is bringing up that we're going to see Jackson versus Allen. It's like this is one of the biggest matchups between two of the biggest quarterbacks in the NFL. It's always fun to see. And when you put up, the chance to go into the AFC Championship on the line, it's a really entertaining story there. I don't like saying story there, but the referees were talking to Josh Allen middle of the game today. Suspicious.
They have the script.
Very much. And of course, I will push back because if you look at the regular season stats between Bo Nix and Josh Allen, they're very similar. Josh Allen does take the lead in most of them, but they're very close. Unless you look at the interception one, that's where Bo Nix wins by 3. So I can't say the words I want to say, but they start with suck, long pause, and end with it.
Well, I mean, I think the only issue is opposed to Bo Nix, Lamar versus Allen is the 2 MVP favorites. And I think Bo Nix is a little bit away from being an MVP candidate compared to a Josh Allen. But there is a lot of Josh Allen isms in Bo Nix. I don't think there's anything wrong with hitching your wagon long-term to Bo Nix. I don't think there's anything wrong with hitching your wagon to a lot of the quarterbacks from that rookie class. But let's set up the divisional round. Lamar Jackson and his Baltimore Ravens take on Josh Allen and his Buffalo, and CJ Stroud, his Houston Texans, go to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. And this is on the AFC side. We're going to end up seeing on the NFC side over the next few hours and on Monday night how that plays out. But since we got the chance to talk about the AFC, where I think the AFC has the better quarterback play, has a lot of the marquee names, a lot of Super Bowl favorites. Lamar versus Allen, the MVP contest, it's already over. The vote, this doesn't count to the MVP votes. But this is the matchup a lot of people believed is the true AFC championship game. A lot of people, a lot of pundits believe one of these two teams can beat Kansas City. But this is the question I ask everybody, and this is the question you have to ask if you're a Houston Texans fan. Who is going to KC and putting up enough points against that defense? Who is going to be able to manage the game clock and the way the game pace is going to keep that ball away from Patrick Mahomes when it matters the most? That is what this AFC last 4 teams are playing out. The final 4 is, do any of these teams have the player to take down the dragon that is Patrick Mahomes? Because just like the Tom Brady era, until it happens, I'm going to be really slow on that train to say they're done. There's a lot of people who want to call out that defense that had a lot of points put up on them the last few weeks, but they've had enough time to get healthy. And it's really cold. I don't know if you guys noticed, there was a lot of snow around the Kansas City era.
Yeah, hell froze over last weekend.
Yeah, so I think there's a really good chance that the Ravens versus Bills game is going to be awesome. And I think CJ Stroud has a chance to do something special and do something great in Kansas City. But I think all roads still lead to, can you go to KC in January and beat Patrick Mahomes? Paulie, you're seeing the AFC divisional round play out. You've seen a lot of Patrick Mahomes in your lifetime already. How do you think these 4 teams, these 4 quarterbacks, these 4 stories play out?
I think one of the biggest stories is that the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, only put up 30 points twice this year, never put up more than that in a game.
I don't even think they did it twice.
I was looking at their results. I think they got 30 exactly a couple of times this year. I could be wrong about it, but I thought this year they didn't reach that. But either way, the point still stands that normally they put up a lot of points all of these teams remaining can put up a lot of points in their games. Case in point, some of these teams have already put up 31 or more points in the games that they've played so far. So I think that's going to be an important part is will Mahomes be able to put up that many points? Will the Kansas City defense be able to create stops, which they've been pretty solid this year, maybe one of their better defensive years. But I mean, that's going to be it. Whoever wins the Baltimore Buffalo game is going to be a battle-tested, great team. Hopefully they'll be healthy enough. And, we'll see if Stroud can pull off the upset. But I think no matter what, you can rank them however you want, but it's going to be a strong offensive team that's going to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl.
And saying all that, right, the amount of points they scored, they had the 10th strength of schedule, means they had the 10th toughest schedule in the NFL this season, and they still won 15 games. They still lost Isaiah Pacheco. They still had injuries. They got a DeAndre Hopkins late. This is a team that was just figuring out. We all were making fun of them. We all thought, hey, you know what? This might be the end of it. Or what a lot of people were thinking, including myself, was they're just biding their time. They just got to win enough games. They just got to win their division. They just got to guarantee that you got to go to KC. You got to go to Arrowhead. Marver, the Final Four in the AFC. How are you feeling? What's got you excited? Does it even matter the fact that it's still KC that's in the middle of all this?
I mean, I think that there may be some closer games in the NFC, and the road teams, I think, have an excellent chance to win, the ones that are in the Bears division particularly. But I did want to point out one thing about Buffalo. In recent history, the only two teams they've lost to in the playoffs are Cincinnati and Kansas City. So that's one fact. And they've also got a long-standing problem with the Super Bowl. They went in 1990, 91, 92, and 93 before you were all born with Jim Kelly and lost all four times. There. So, I mean, they definitely have that ghost to slay. And, we'll see what happens with that. So it would be nice to see them win one finally, because it's been, they had their chances 30 some odd years ago, but didn't convert. So I'd like to see, them win the Baltimore game and maybe get there again, but we'll see what happens with that. And you asked me about the NFC. Like I said, I mean, Green Bay and Minnesota were so tough all year round, and they have to play on the road in Philadelphia. I mean, Green Bay isn't starting too well in that game. We'll keep you updated so you don't have to turn it on. It's 10-0 Philadelphia. And and Minnesota gets to play in the desert against in Arizona against the Rams. And I mean, the Rams are one of those divisional champs that didn't have an outstanding record, much like Tampa. And you've got your, arguably the best rookie quarterback with the Commanders, and Daniels will maybe be able to win a road game. So I'm thinking you might have a couple lower seeds win in that situation, only because the Rams and the Bucks, won a division and they weren't, didn't have outstanding records. That's funny because the Vikings and the Packers had better records, and they had to play each other, and they had to play Detroit as well. So they're battle tested, I think. So I think that you may not have chalk hold in the NFC, but it remains to be seen, because it's starting out chalk's holding in Philadelphia so far.
And I think Tampa Bay, and I said it last week, I've said it on social media, I think Tampa Bay is going to the Super Bowl. I think the NFC has the most explosive offenses compared to the AFC. And the AFC knows you have a lot of offensive explosion. You take a team like Tampa Bay, right? They go into Detroit or any of these teams, and with Bucky Irving and with Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield, Baker on any given day, 300 yards, 3 interceptions, but 5 touchdowns, they win 36-24. Like, that is what Tampa Bay has done all season. Tampa Bay is one of these teams like a Detroit where if you are going to go in there and you're going to doubt them, they have beaten your favorite teams. They have been on prime time. They have continuously ruined people's money lines, people's prop bets, because they have continuously been one of the better teams. So I think, to Marver's point, there's not going to be chalk. I think the NFC is the seedings, throw it away. The NFC is just who is going to play the best that given day. But before we know how that actually is going to set itself up, what do you think about the AFC, Devin, the Final Four?
I mean, I want to confirm, because I thought I was right, but there's only been one team that's beaten that's beaten both the number one seed in the AFC and NFC, and that's the Buffalo Bills here. Does that make them a bit of a favorite? As Marver said, they've been to 4 Super Bowls in a row, and they're great going. I saw Paul on his nice social media love to share that that's his team to win the entire Super Bowl this year. I don't know necessarily. You can never count on Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes here, but that's going to be very interesting, as Mercado says, once we get to December, once Once we're in January here, separates the men from the boys here. And it's just one of those things right now where we got so many of these quarterbacks that just have a lot of talent. And then there's a CJ Stroud, different story. Reminds me of 2016 when you had Tom Brady, Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, and Christian Ponder as your final four. Anything can happen in the playoffs, baby. But the way I see just right now, it's just AFC, it kind of feels like we knew how the first round was going to go pretty much, unless you count that spoiler from the Texans here. But the NFC, though, I can't really see it going anyway. I mean, all of us, with the exception of Marvin, picked the Eagles to win today, but who knows, as he snickers at me for that comment. But anything can happen right here, because I'm telling you right now, this game tonight between the Commanders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's going to be a blowout, I hope. I hope for a high-scoring game. But you'd be like, okay, $500, who you put in this game? I'd have to sit down and think for a long time before I start betting money on anyone in the NFC right now.
Yeah, to win the entire Super Bowl?
Just to win this week?
Yeah, it's hard. And this goes to show in the NFC where it goes to my point. As easily as I have Tampa Bay going to the Super Bowl, they can blow up my entire bracket today just by Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin going nuclear. But the entire NFC comes down to who do you actually have strong belief in to hold the team down the way we've seen right now. I think Philadelphia was the easy pick against Green Bay. I think Green Bay has been volatile all season. Jordan Love, and I think it was a turnover by Jordan Love, and it goes to the volatility, and it also goes to the seeding and who you're playing and how things have been going. The NFL playoffs, unlike any other playoffs, is a war of attrition. How healthy are you? What has your matchup been? What is the weather like? What are all the circumstances going into it? In one case, you have Arizona and the Rams, where because of the fires, it's completely changed the way the Rams have had to worry about their playoff hopes, having to go to Arizona.
To losing the home field advantage, and also some people probably having to worry about their homes.
Did they count on that?
No,
you know what I mean? And that's the point. It's like any of these things can happen. That's why the only thing I'm steadfast on is Kansas City having to go to KC, having to win there to go to the Super Bowl. That is an uphill battle for any team, including a centaur like Josh Allen. I love Josh Allen, but it's a tough task for Lamar Jackson. This is their monkey off their back for these two quarterbacks. Joe Burrow's the only one of these young guys in the playoffs when it mattered the most. I don't care what you do on Sunday Night Football. I don't care what you do on Monday Night Football. That's all great on fantasy season for betting, but for their legacy, it comes down to what do you do in January? And the only one out of these young quarterbacks that's done it has been Joe Burrow. So to Lamar and to Josh Allen, it's more than just can they get to the AFC Championship game? Can they get to the Super Bowl? Can they take care and exercise the demon that is Patrick Mahomes and that Kansas City franchise that has held them down? It is what Tom Brady put a lot of teams went through. And Tom Brady was the only one that beat him in the Super Bowl.
Twice.
And that's what it took, is the greatest of all time. So you can't take for granted any of these games. The fact that you had Lamar Jackson and his Ravens and Josh Allen and his Bills put the work in like they did is a testament how great of seasons they were having. But you're seeing right now Jordan Love in the playoffs. It's a tough thing come January to be on that next level, to take that next step. That's why it was huge for CJ Stroud to win that game, answering a bunch of questions that he may have had. But I think all in all, the NFC and the AFC, if nothing else, have superstar interest in them. These teams are interesting. These matchups are interesting for the franchises, for the fan bases. What would it mean for Lamar Jackson and his legacy, for Josh Allen and the Bills to win a Super Bowl? Imagine if Detroit gets all the way there. I think for them, just getting there is such a victory in its own. Mm-hmm. These are what these playoffs are bringing right now. And I think, unfortunately, the games may have not been so competitive. I think watch out tonight for Tampa Bay, Washington. That might be the game of the wild card weekend. There's a sense of desperation in some of these teams right now to survive this week, to get to the divisional round. And I think that's what I love most about this. And what a great 5 days if you're a football fan. You have the 2 college football playoff,
which were both great games,
into wild card weekend. I mean, that is great fodder. That is great eating for us football fans. And if the games get a little bit more interesting as the evening and tomorrow goes on, I think on schedule, wild card weekend is always fun because there's so much football. It's kind of like the first few weeks of the tournament. But the divisional round is when the real teams, the right teams, the right quarterbacks, the defenses that travel
And
show
you'll
up.
get the two divisional round days followed by the culminating in the Notre Dame versus Ohio State championship game.
It works itself out perfectly on the calendar where you get the best football. So if you were a little bit frustrated, I think this weekend, and I'm not an NFL apologist, Roger Goodell can do that. But if you're waiting for the best football, it's coming because we do have some awesome matchups, including just to finish off this wild card weekend. The idea that a hot Baker Mayfield, who's rejuvenated his career with awesome offense, takes on Jaden Daniels, rookie of the year, with crazy offensive power, and possibly the Bears head coach in Cliff Kingsbury. There's a lot to digest these next few weeks and these next few days when it comes to the NFL, NFC, and AFC playoffs. But when we come back here on the Sports Cubicle, we move a little bit away from the greatness of some of these coaches that are in the playoffs. And can some of these coaches on the offensive, defensive side, on the coordinated side of these teams, bring that greatness here to Chicago? We take a look at the landscape and the news that has been breaking on head coaching searches. The head coaching carousel continues here on the Sports Cubicle. He's Dan Marver. He's Paul Shivari, the one and only Devin Tingle on the board. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. Call Texas 773-763-9278. We're on YouTube right now live at the Sports Cubicle. Leave us a comment. Send us an email over at sportscubicle@gmail.com.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
We had a call on this show, a black woman who called in to say that the pre-election finger pointing at black voters was wrong, that she and her community showed up. And she then asked, with real agony and some anger in her voice, where were the rest of us? She felt betrayed. Boy, I understand those feelings.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
Taxes are almost due. Hurry into Jackson Hewitt for 50% off tax prep, but do it before April 9th. Limited time offer for new clients filing at participating locations. Max savings $200. Visit jacksonhewitt.com/50 for terms.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
And we keep things rolling here on the Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, the hellacious one, Paul Shivari, Mike Mercado. It's been 3-4 years, and I still don't have a nickname for this man. And I'm Devin Tingle. But let's go to the phones really quick. Jim from Chicago. Faithful good old Jim. Thank you for calling.
Hi, gentlemen. Hey, what freaked me out this week was the line. 9.5 points. Notre Dame's a 9.5-point dog. Well, I can think it was in Ohio. If you were a Catholic, you couldn't get elected to any kind of an office if you were Catholic after World War II. So the guys that made this line must be Protestants from Ohio or somewhere in that area. But I just say, Jeremiah Love, to me, is the best back I've seen come along in a long, long time. I don't know if his knee's all right. They only play him a few plays. And if he's healthy, that line is ridiculous. And what I was going to say is you can take into consideration a couple of things. Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was opened up last week or 2 weeks ago. And I expect a big game from Notre Dame. And the other thing I was going to say, Evil Knievel Dave from Hoffman Estates, he likes the Lions. And I'm right now making a little parlay with Notre Dame and the Lions winning the Super Bowl. I think Goff and Gibbs are the deadliest combination going at football. Gibbs had all perfect they got in Detroit, and Goff is just having an insane year. He's having a beautiful year. So I don't know. And this Campbell guy looks like he'd love to hoist the trophy. Anyway, you guys have a great show. Thank you much.
You're the best, Jim. Thank you. And I think it's a great point of what Jahmyr Gibbs and how Jared Goff and so many players have elevated their game in Detroit. And you know what? Marcus Freeman is somebody who I think deserves a lot of credit for what he's done to Notre Dame. I'm not a Notre Dame fan. Again, follow me on social media. I am not a Notre Dame fan. I love so many local schools here. So I always find it weird that so many people who aren't either Irish, don't have any connection to the school, that type of thing, love them so much.
So the Irish Catholics in Chicago, you know, you go to Joliet Catholic, you go to Mount Carmel, Brother Rice, you know, your dream is to play for the Fighting Irish.
You got the checklist down, but you can't deny what a great run they've had. and how they've taken advantage of their seeding, how they've taken advantage of game situation, and how they showed up when it mattered the most, because they needed to show up in their semifinals. So,
I mean, we'll get to the college football playoff next week and preview that, but just the whole idea that Notre Dame had to get through everything. But I wanted to say, to Jim's point, the line in that Penn State game was 9 points. It's 8.5 that Ohio State's favored in this one, and it's, Notre Dame has proven that they can play just about any team in the way that Texas played Ohio State. You'd think that Notre Dame has a fighting shot to get within a touchdown of Ohio State in this game, but we can get to all of that next week.
And this is, again, a precursor, like you're saying, but the two teams, one lost to Northern Illinois and one lost to Michigan. So there is so much that we can get into. If these lines even matter, doesn't matter when kickoff happens and all the emotion and the big timeness of that game happens, especially between two blue chip legacy campuses and institutes like Ohio State and Notre Dame. But speaking about Marcus Freeman, speaking about Dan Campbell, the Chicago Bears and the head coaching carousel is getting ridiculous. So I think, as a preamble, I think the most important thing to tell people is the Bears, if they specifically want the coordinator from Baltimore, the coordinator from Detroit, the coordinator from any team, whatever your favorite guy is, right? If they bring back John Madden from the afterlife, they can't do it if he's on a playoff team, right? So they were only able to do the virtual meetings. Mike Vrabel was a little bit different because he wasn't working for anybody. He could get hired right now, which is why it happened. And it still makes you question why they didn't bring him in person, unless if they knew, and the whole league knew, we all knew this, he was going to go to New England. New England was the only choice. But there has been so many names. And I think that's what frustrates Bears the most, frustrates Bears fans the most. I should be more specific. It's not that they are turning every stone. It's how they are doing it. It is the simple fact that it's names that everybody questions. Everybody raises their eyebrow. You see a name like Pete Carroll, you're like, okay, that's interesting. That's thinking a little bit outside the box. I'm cool with that. When you see a name like Arthur Smith, it's, why haven't you learned any lesson? Why do you have to learn everything the hard way? And when it really comes down to Ben Johnson or Todd Monken or any of these other top tier guys that they may want, you have to get your guy. We make this argument all the time, whether it's the Cubs, the White Sox, the Bulls, the Democrats, the CEO of Apple. If you got your guy, if you got your person, man, woman, or child, don't let them leave the facility. They do not leave Hallis Hall. And I don't care if they don't want to have lunch with Virginia, double dates with Kevin Warren. I don't care if they don't swear. Get the person that's going to be the CEO of your football team. Now, there have been reports that came out that if you're going to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears, you have to be okay with, you take care of the football team. You answer to Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles answers to Kevin Warren. Kevin Warren's ultimately answers to George McCaskey. If you're okay with that, and there's a lot of people who are, that's just called a structure of some businesses. You may not like it because the Bears haven't earned any one of your goodwill. But if a coach comes in and handles his business, it should be beyond the touch of George McCaskey. It should just come down to Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles picking the right guy to handle this part of the business so that Kevin Warren can go build a stadium, so that Ryan Poles can build the roster that his head coach needs, and so that the McCaskies can finally make the money that they wanted to make for so long and be a respectable ownership in the National Football League. So the whole head coaching search has really once again spotlighted how the Bears always do things so bearish. And it's, you listen to Ian Rappaport making jokes after Mike Vrabel is hired. The next thing is they have interviewed Kyle Brandt as well as all these names. When Ian Rappaport, the voice of the NFL, right next to Adam Schefter, is making fun of you or has you in jokes, you've done something wrong. Marver, the head coaching search has been crazy. Right. What have you thought?
Well, they're probably going to hire an offensive or defensive coordinator, but I'll tell you, this is who I'd like. I would actually like them to hire a guy with a record, Pete Carroll. I mean, he's in the sweet spot. He's 73 years old, and for me, that's a sweet spot in terms of age. And
Why is that, Marber?
I don't know.
Why is that?
I mean, if you're going to think about Marcus Freeman, you might as well hire Thomas Hammock of NIU because he beat him. So I don't know. I mean, these other names, you gave us a long list there. Mike Kafka is a Northwestern connection. I like Rivera too, but I mean, it seems like it's going to be the old thing where you're going to have some guy with no head coaching experience is going to look like looking at deer in the headlights, on the sidelines eventually. I'd like somebody with a record. I don't know if you'd want it. Probably too much money, not enough authority. But Carroll's my guy.
Paulie, you're one of your teams right now. Obviously, everybody who's a fan here at the Sports, you're in a coaching search. I told you privately, Ben Johnson was in play the minute that Tom Brady and Mark Davis cleaned house, and that they wanted to make a big splash, and that he is the golden boy right now. He is the hire. He is the Shohei Ohtani of this hiring process. What are you thinking about how the Bears are handling it? And more specifically, Ben Johnson, because now you've had to pay a little bit of attention to Ben Johnson. Your thought of how all this is going down, this crazy stew.
As far as like the Bears are concerned, a lot of the mistakes they made, I've been saying over the weeks, were, like Eberflus, the coaching staff just didn't get them prepared for certain just basic things that a football team should be on top of, like where you are on the field, where the clock's at, that sort of thing. The Bears tend to lean towards unproven coordinators, which is why a Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Drew Petzing might be a valuable candidate for the cheap option. But yeah, I mean, the Raiders, wasn't surprised about them getting rid of Antonio Pierce, and was surprised that they got rid of their GM, Tom Telesco. That changes some things up. Johnson, of course, Ben Johnson, the hot coordinator candidate. We talked off the air the other day about when coordinators kind of have to find that moment. They'll interview. If the opportunity comes, they have to accept the job, even if it's in the division, even if it is, hey, maybe it's not going to work out. They got to take whatever opportunity they can get, because in the moment that might be it. That might be, Ben Johnson comes to the Bears, fails, and maybe it was never going to work out no matter where he went, or maybe a team gives him a second chance, and who knows. But I think it's got to be a Pete Carroll. I'd say Ron Rivera, but Rivera kind of had a disastrous tenure with Washington. I don't think it was that great. Carolina, you could say maybe it was Cam Newton, maybe it was certain reasons why they were able to do so good. But a disciplined coach, a coach that's going to use that experience to kind of clean up some of the sloppy stuff. Because, we got to remember that Caleb Williams wasn't disastrous this year. At the same time, it took him a few weeks to get his first touchdown. He didn't turn over the ball much. He's a very coachable guy, so I don't think you necessarily have to go and get the hot coordinator candidate, or maybe the hot coordinator candidate. Sure, he solved some of the problems with Williams not being able to put the ball in the end zone, but you're still losing games by beating yourself at the end just because you didn't call the timeout at the right spot, or you didn't move your field goal kicker up to about a 45-yard kick instead of a 50-yard kick. So not to say that someone with previous experience or that's older necessarily is the only one that knows how to solve these sort of problems, but I think you see the track record where you're really rolling the dice with a Ben Johnson. Now, that's my Bears thoughts. I think just as far as watching the Bears. With the Raiders, they need just about anything. Anything needs to turn them around. We know that they're not interested in Deion Sanders. They could be interested in his son Shedeur Sanders, but not Deion Sanders. So that solves that problem right there. But as soon as I heard that they were going to fire their general manager, and also seeing simultaneously reports saying that teams are really looking past the John Gruden email scandal.
Media helps, man.
Yeah, he never really did anything legally wrong, and no one really got rid of. Pete Carroll. There's a reason why Pete Carroll's a popular choice with the Raiders as well. But Gruden is someone that I think I could see the Raiders going with him for a third time. Now, the difference is Brady's in charge.
Yes.
So that does change some things. And you were saying that because Brady's in play, Ben Johnson's in play. And there's actually been reports about this. And think of this conflict of interest. Brady, being a minority owner of the team, is going to be broadcasting NFC football games starting next week. Actually, right now, probably calling the Packers and the Eagles right now. But next week, one of these teams is going to be at Detroit playing the Lions. Will that be the game that Fox has their number one broadcast team, Kevin Burkhardt, Tom Brady on? Who knows? They can dodge that next week and go with, the Eagles or, whatever other division winner or whoever might be there. Or the NFC Championship game, if the Lions are there, or the Super Bowl, if the Lions are there, you can't avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a total conflict of interest? Does the NFL want this to have one of their own owners in a broadcast talking up one of the offensive coordinators who they might feasibly sign in these next few weeks, maybe before the Super Bowl, after the Super Bowl, somewhere around there? That's an interesting storyline, and I think regardless of what the Raiders do, the Bears do, they've got to get someone that fits right now in that role. I think they're looking for instant success, especially for the Bears. With Bears, it's no question. It's got to be instant success, 10 wins, competing in the division, winning division games, not making mistakes. With the Raiders, it's you got to build a culture. You have a little bit of wiggle room in 1 year, but they're probably going to expect you to start winning games as soon as possible.
And there's so much that Tom Brady's conflict as a broadcaster owner has really come to the spotlight the last few weeks, which makes me believe that his time as the lead broadcaster on Fox is coming to an end sooner than later. But that's a whole different conversation. And I do want to circle back on the Gruden thing as the weeks go on, as this story continues to develop. I do want to make some quick additions to Paul's point. When you're looking at the Bears, they also have $80+ million in salary cap space. So that is going to be huge for any incoming coach to know there could be a huge roster overhaul, that you could do a lot of additions on the line, on the defensive side of the line, because you do have a lot of draft capital as well. If I had to make a list right now, and I'm going to throw it to Marver in a second to see what his thoughts are on my power rankings, I think Ben Johnson is number 1 on their list. I think Todd Monken is number 2. I think what he's done with Baltimore, I think the maturation of Lamar Jackson this season, I think seeing how he's utilized all their wide receivers, the fact that he didn't have to use Deontay Johnson, the way they've used a committee of running backs, I think Baltimore, getting anything from Baltimore is a great sign. I don't think you're finishing in second if you end up with Monken opposed to Ben Johnson. I think Cliff Kingsbury is in play at number 3. And my 4th one, and it's only a pipe dream, but if Pittsburgh wants to be stupid enough and they want to move on from Mike Tomlin, every team that has an opening and every team that has an inkling that they're going to fire their coach needs to make a phone call right now. If you are upset with 9 wins every season, 10 wins every season, yeah, you may not win the Super Bowl every year. Sorry, it's the Patrick Mahomes era. But if you're able to have a bite at the apple where all you need to do is win one game any given Sunday for a few weeks in January, I will take that chance with Mike Tomlin right now. If you're willing to go after any of these other head coaches like a Kyle Shanahan, you better, you're behind. I'm 100% in on Mike Tomlin. Marver, what do you think about my power rankings of head coaches?
I think that the top 3 are more likely than number 4. I don't think that Tomlin's going to be fired by the Steelers.
No, they would have to be out of their mind.
I think that's what reports are saying, that the Steelers have said they're sticking with him.
Right. So, I mean, I think you've got them in the right order. I think that Ben Johnson is probably the favorite, honestly, at this point in time. And I would anticipate that that's who they're eventually going to hire. But, of course, Detroit may be playing all the way until February 9th. So I don't know what the rules are. They can do Zooms or whatever, but they wouldn't be. And that would put them at, a little bit at a disadvantage if they don't have a coach until the middle of February. But we'll see what happens in that regard, because that's probably the best choice of the assistants, and particularly the ones you named. I just would like, again, maybe it didn't work so well. They've hired people that have had coaching experience like Fox and others, and so I don't know if that's going to be the answer, but I would like to see that for a change. And of course, the guy I mentioned developed with Russell Wilson in Seattle, namely Carroll, and did pretty well. Got this with his success there. So I mean, and that could be a situation where they have like on a coach in waiting, and have him on the staff, and he could be there a year or two, and then this other guy would be there, like Shire for Krzyzewski or something, where he'd be moved right in when Carroll hits 75 or whatever the case might be. But it would seem like a good marriage to me. But probably it's going to be Johnson, I think.
I like Pete Carroll. I mean, I think it's hard. You'll never hear anybody really say a bad word on Pete Carroll. A lot of players might question the play on the goal line, not giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch and having Russell Wilson throw the ball and costing them a Super Bowl?
Daryl Bevel that did that call. I was saying before that happened when the Bears ended up hiring Mark Trestman. I liked Daryl Bevel as the pick, and then that happened in the Super Bowl.
And you got to be okay with that because as much success as Pete Carroll has had, Seattle wasn't his first time in the NFL. Pete Carroll has had major success in college and failures before Seattle in the NFL. He's been a coach that has had multiple chances. I'm not dogging him for it. I'm just saying this isn't a guy who went straight from USC, straight to Seattle, had all the success, and that was only his exposure. He's been a lifer forever, just like Bill Belichick. These have been guys who have been assistants for a long time. And if that's what you want to bring in, I'm okay with that. I am not going to argue Pete Carroll becoming a head coach of any team in the NFL. That is a different 74-year-old. That is not the same 74 you see on a lot of people. But it does, as much as Ben Johnson or any first-time head coach is very bearish, so is kind of Pete Carroll. Trying to go for the easiest solution, opposed to the solution that is best long-term. You're not winning the Super Bowl next year. You're hoping you're competing. You're hoping that you're winning more games.
But I think that's what the Bears think. I think they're making the hire because I think they want to turn it around in a 1 or 2 year span.
So then you got
Ryan Poles' job is on the line.
Their all jobs on the line.
As soon as he makes that hire, his job is on the line.
It's not just Ryan Poles. Right now.
Everybody. But Ryan, it starts with Ryan Poles.
Specifically, Ryan Poles is the first one. Caleb Williams is playing for that already. Is playing for the second contract. He knows he's going to get it. But you're also playing to see, can we get him for that? Are we, as an organization, going to have him on the second contract? I mean, you've seen these names. You're hearing this conversation. You know the salary cap. You know kind of the drama and the black cloud that constantly hangs over the scene when it comes to these type of decision makings. What are your thoughts about my power rankings, the list we've seen, how they're handling this entire situation?
Like number Marver. Like Marver said, your number 4 is way too much to even be a fever dream to think that's going to happen here. You need to go smoke a little words I can't say on the radio in the parking lot, or stop smoking those if you're thinking
more of it for Tomlin, please.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, but it's just one of those things. Ben Johnson does seem like the perfect right pick. And I do get spoiled here because in the city of Chicago, we have this great owner named Jerry Reinsdorf who does the dumbest hires anytime he has to make any decision, especially coaching here.
I don't know. I like the Will Venable hire.
Yeah, Paul, shut up for a
Billy
minute.
That is a good one.
The Billy Donovan hire wasn't terrible considering what Garpax was throwing up there.
But that had
and Tom Thibodeau was a good. I mean, I don't know, but it's also they're catching these guys. Reinsdorf, especially, is not catching these guys after they've had previous success, with the exception of Donovan. It's always at some sort of like redemption or second chance or first real big opportunity. So
which almost correlates.
But the Bears, especially though, aside from John Fox, I don't think they've ever hired a coach with previous head coaching experience that wasn't the owner of the team. So that's but there's so many guys on this list that have previous head coaching experience, even if it's like Mike Kafka for a few games or Arthur Smith with a disastrous tenure, Cliff Kingsbury, so it's I think it'd be a little bit different. But Carroll, I think, is the anti-Bears hire, other than the fact that he's older than I think what they're looking for and has the previous head coaching experience. And I'm not trying to argue that he'd be a good one or not. It'd be such a weird hire for them. I don't think it would be a very Bears hire. I think they're going to go with someone that would be younger or a little unproven and cheaper, unless it were someone like an Arthur Smith or Kingsbury that have had the previous. Do you get what I'm saying?
100%.
Like Rivera is kind of like why Rivera and not Carroll, where you think he would be a Bear, and that's only because Rivera's been with the organization before, where there's that familiar relationship. So I don't think the Bears would go for a Pete Carroll, even though I do think a Pete Carroll would at least kind of crack the whip really quickly to try and turn this team around and get them to Super Bowl caliber immediately.
But I think, and I'm with you, but I think both things could exist in the same universe, where Ron Rivera just as easily as Pete Carroll is a very Bears hire, because it's not about what they're bringing in schematically. It's not what they're bringing as a foundation to their playbook. You're bringing in somebody who's going to change the culture. That's a culture hire. What you need now is not just a culture hire. You need somebody who's going to take the thing down to the studs and rebuild the offense, rebuild the way people are perceiving this team, the way they're ran, the way practices are ran, the way training camp is ran.
But they never really had the culture change, with the exception of like Ditka.
I mean, Lovie Smith completely changed the culture of Chicago.
But I don't think that's why they hired him, though. I think that just kind of came with it.
Oh, John Fox is that higher. Mark Trestman was that higher. All these guys were brought in because of the way they were changing the perception of the last guy. The Bears have constantly, for the last 4 coaches, have hired somebody that's the opposite of the guy that replaced him. That is as Bears get.
Well, going in with the John Fox thing, it's like he was brought in to change the culture, and we had 3 seasons of 3, 5, and 6 win seasons. I don't think we need to go back to there, especially when we have the talent here. And Jay Cutler had so much dang potential there. And we kind of just let that sit here, and we can't do the same with Caleb Williams here. Yes, I do agree with Paul. Pete Carroll is the guy when you see what he did with Geno Smith, of all people. Remember how everyone thought Geno Smith was garbage? But again, going back to this, though, if Jerry Reinsdorf were in charge, Paul, Brian Flores would have already had the job here, and we'd be blowing smoke up everyone else's keister right now here. Honestly, watching the Bills Denver game, they were mentioning Joe Brady was looking for a job and how he could be the guy here and they mentioned the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
But we'd love to hear from you guys. 773-763-9278. Let's go to our good friend Dave from Hoffman Estates. What's going on, Dave?
Hey guys, I got a couple of quickly. I know you're not wild about my Lions, but personally, I think Dan Campbell should be getting that Coach of the Year. Your own admission, very talking about how banged up Detroit was and all of this all through the year. And yet he kept that team motivated, kept them together, and they won on pure guts alone on that last game. And they got a job of a coach. And they went 15-2, first time ever.
You know what, Dave? Let me tell you this too. This is something that I'm with you. I think Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell are kind of the favorites right now. Kevin O'Connell right now the favorite at least some sporting odds. Dan Campbell at number 2,
Andy Reid,
and Andy Reid right there.
16 wins.
Yeah, Andy Reid right there. And again, that's how much the NFL
16-1 this year.
15-2, and it goes to show to Dave's point though that Dan Campbell has kept this team together. And it's the one question you really should have if you're somebody who's on the camp of Ben Johnson becoming the head coach, if you're a Raiders fan, if you're a Jaguars fan, if you're a Bears fan. Because Dan Campbell's the one that has to meet the media when things go right or wrong, when there's a major injury, when he has to make the decision on David Montgomery. It's Dan Campbell that has to set the tone the entire preseason, the entire offseason, the entire training camp. And Ben Johnson is going to have to answer that question by himself. It's his biggest hurdle. It's the guy who's in front of the podium. It's the guy that's in front of those men in the entire roster in August. And it goes to Dan Campbell. And to your point, Dave, where Dan Campbell has earned the right at the very least to be on the top tier list of NFL coaches. Heck, NFL Coach of the Year any given year.
Yeah, and talking about coaches, I also heard something that the Bears are possibly talking about the Notre Dame head coach of getting him.
So Marcus Freeman obviously having a great run. There is something, as much as I like Marcus Freeman, and I think Marwa and I have talked about this for years, there is something called the Chicago leverage, the Chicago Bears leverage, where somebody like Ryan Fitzpatrick for years over at Northwestern and any of the Notre Dame coaches use the Bears as leverages as, well, the Bears might be interested in me as the new head coach, and all of a sudden the alumni make sure that you're covered for the next 10 years. So I think Marcus Freeman deservedly should get head coaching calls for the NFL if he wants to leave, which is such a great gig. I mean, Notre Dame might as well be a pro football team as it is, but that is going to be, I think, more of a ploy to get money, just like the the Iowa State coach that we heard about.
It is pro football. They're being paid now.
Fair enough. Dave, any final thoughts, buddy?
I'll leave you on this one. It's kind of tying a little bit of the politics with today. And I was asked the question, we got talking. Now that we're going to have a change of a president again, who does not like DEI and all that, do you think they're going to change Washington back to the Redskins again?
The government can't control that. And no, they would never change it back to the Redskins, even if it's new owners. Let's be real here, because the NFL won't let them trademark it.
And they're making so much money now, and they're winning as the Commanders. Jaden Daniels is known in that jersey. So I think the NFL, if nothing else, likes one thing more than anything. That's money, and lots of it.
And the name was changed. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know whose administration the name was changed during, but it doesn't really matter. It has nothing to do with the administration, honestly, like Devin said.
And they have bigger issues right now. They have that entire stadium conversation going on of leaving Washington proper, going out to the suburbs. So it's going to be interesting to see how the new regime in Washington impacts more their stadium deal. Talk about stadiums here in Chicago, how Washington Stadium is going to be impacted there.
Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much, buddy. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Good luck next week with your Lions.
Oh, God, I hope so. I'd love to meet Washington again because that's who knocked us out in 1991 from getting to the big show. I'd love to be. So, anyway, be well, guys. Thanks for taking the call.
Thanks, Dave. And it should be great no matter what. I mean, that next week's matchup, again, it's just the NFC is so many fun teams. You just really don't know who to pick. You may have your favorite and who you're picking in your pools or in your parlays. But honestly, if you dug deep down inside in the NFC specifically, you don't know who's going to win any given game. Right now, Marvel, what's the score in the Green Bay-Philadelphia game?
You got 10-0 just before halftime, Eagles.
Are you comfortable saying that Green Bay is done in the first? No, right? Like they can still come back and win this. The NFC has that potential in all their games coming up.
Unless they doink it, then the game's over. Just like the Broncos showed.
We don't speak about doinks here on the Sports Cubicle.
I'll call you a dink instead.
Coming up next, it is nothing that is, there's absolutely no laughing matter. It is a sad story that has impacted the political world, the entertainment world, the sports world, everyday living. It is the LA fires and the damages, the horrific images and videos we have seen out there. How has it impacted the sports world? We tackle that next here on the Sports Cubicle. Call us at 773-763-9278. We're on YouTube live right now at the Sports Cubicle. It's Dan Marver. It's Paul Shivari. I'm Mike Mercado. He is Devin Tingle. We got a whole lot left here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 and HeartlandSignal.com.
Bring back Washington football team.
Dive deeper into the heart of the news and stories at WCPT 820 and across the Midwest by checking out our website, HeartlandSignal.com.
It's the coverage I can count on every time.
For the latest news updates, in-depth analysis, compelling stories, comprehensive election coverage, live streams, and thought-provoking opinions, head to HeartlandSignal.com.
When I need to know, they're there.
They keep me informed and updated wherever I am.
Stay informed with WCPT 820, your go-to source for where facts matter.
NBC News Radio, I'm Chris Coraggio. It's a critical day for crews battling the catastrophic wildfires in Southern California. Fire officials are reporting some progress against the two biggest fires in Los Angeles, and firefighters are racing against the arrival of more powerful Santa Ana winds. At least 16 people have died and more than 100,000 residents are under evacuation orders, and authorities warn the death toll is likely to rise. California Governor Gavin Newsom wants to fast-track efforts to rebuild after the wildfires. Newsom told NBC's Meet the Press that he's issuing an executive order that aims to remove some of the obstacles faced by residents hoping to quickly rebuild their homes. This will reportedly involve suspending some laws aimed at protecting the local environment. President Biden is awarding Pope Francis the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction. Details now from Lisa Carton.
The White House made the announcement Saturday, noting that Biden called the Pope a light of faith, hope, and love that shines brightly across the world. The White House commended Pope Francis for his commitment to serving the poor as well as advocating for peace and protecting the planet. The president canceled his trip to the Vatican this weekend to monitor the wildfires in Southern California.
People across the Southeast are digging out of heavy snow after the region was hit by its biggest winter storm in years. Parts of Arkansas and Oklahoma got over a foot of snow over the last couple of days. Parts of Texas saw 10 inches of snow, and Memphis recorded 7 inches. The 2 inches of snow that fell in Atlanta was the most it had seen in years. Den of Thieves 2, Pantera, stole the top spot at the weekend box office. The heist sequel starring Gerard Butler grossed an estimated $15.5 million in its debut weekend. It dethroned Mufasa the Lion King, which fell to second with an estimated $13.5 million. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 stayed in the race with an $11 million gross to take third. Elsewhere, Robbie Williams' biopic Better Man had a disappointing wide release, bringing in just $1 million. I'm Chris Coraggio, NBC News Radio.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
We're joined by Allie Mae Miller, hypnotherapist.
Hypnosis is portrayed in media in general. Manipulation, mind control. People think it's like a truth serum. My clients describe it as they're in control the whole time. It's definitely not a truth serum. The client decides what they share with me, even in a state of
Think Theory Radio with Damian Perdue, Saturdays at 6 p.m. on WCPT 820.
The
good folks at Wendy's have a revolutionary new product for you. Introducing the new Orange Dreamsicle Frosty. It's like a time machine that takes you all the way back to now, the year 2024. It's the classic, creamy, orangey flavor you remember. Dare I say, it's new-timey. It's the flavor you grew up with, just all grown up. Head over to your local Wendy's establishment and get yours while supplies last. The new Orange Dreamsicle Frosty. Here for the now, for now.
Limited time only at participating Wendy's.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
Oh, let's go. It is the Sports Cubicle. I'm going to shut up. Mercado, take it away.
We, unlike the Chicago Bears, are not on Zoom. We are live here on WCPT 820 and Heartland Signal. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, joined with Paul Shivari, the Marvelous One, Dan Marver, and on the board, Devin Tingle. We hope you all are having a wonderful night. And we always like to have fun here on the Sports Cubicle. But I think when real stuff hits the real world, it is important for us to talk with the amazing audience here on the Sports Cubicle on how it is impacting the sports world, our little part of the world in the sports kingdom, and the tragedy that is happening out in the West Coast, the fires, the Palisades. How do you pronounce it, Pauline?
Palisades.
Fires that have devastated the West Coast and have impacted the sports world. So there's a few stories that I wanted to hit on, and I wanted to get your guys' reaction and how it has impacted you personally, if it's impacted you personally, anybody you know, and how it's impacted the sports world. So the first one I wanted to go with is from Michael Duerte over at NBC Los Angeles. Los Angeles wildfires, Lakers, Rams, Kings, players, and coaches all affected by devastating fires. And the Los Angeles Rams, set to host the Minnesota Vikings in the NFL wildcard round, found themselves adapting to the reality of the fires. Originally scheduled to take place at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, the game has been relocated to State Farm Stadium in Arizona, while SoFi remains outside the immediate fire zones. The decision, made in consultation with public officials and the NFLPA, was a precautionary measure as smoke and ash infiltrates the air across the region. Sean McVay, head coach of the Rams, expressed optimism earlier in the week that the game would remain at SoFi, even as smoke loomed over the team's practice facility in Woodland Hills. Quote, "We're ready to adapt, but our hearts are with the community." So that is just one story. Another one, this is from the basketball world. Lakers coach JJ Redick loses home to fire in Los Angeles. Los Angeles Lakers coach JJ Redick has lost his home to the devastating fire in Los Angeles, according to multiple reports on Thursday. Redick on Thursday said members of his family were among those in Southern California forced to evacuate their homes on Tuesday due to a wildfire that was being whipped by strong winds around Los Angeles. And it hasn't just been coaches. Kawhi Leonard also left the LA Clippers to be with his family as they evacuated from the fires themselves. So that is the personal stories that we are hearing from some of the big names in the sports world. We're seeing the NFL is not immune to natural disasters, to tragedies they've had to change what they're going through. But I think this, and Paul Lee printed this out to me, he brought this to me, and it really upset me. This is from the LA Times by Bill Shaken. And in our sporting corner of the world, betting is everywhere. Consider Major League Baseball. The league has official gaming partners. The broadcast home of its Sunday Night Baseball showcase boasts an official sports book, and the Dodgers World Series celebration was sponsored by a local resort and casino. On the television screen, the bottom line provides updates on odds as well as scores. You can bet on the next pitch, the next home run, the next game, the next World Series. You might enjoy betting on sports, or you might disdain it. Betting on tragedy, profiting off the pain of our community, well, we should condemn that. Polymarket, which bills itself as a prediction market, invited you as of Thursday to stake some bucks on 18 questions related to the Southern California fires, including how many acres will the wildfire burn by Friday? Will the wildfire spread to Santa Monica by Sunday? Will the wildfire be 50% contained? Will LA wildfires be fully contained before February? I suggest you guys read the entire article. Polymarket shouldn't allow people to bet on the LA fires from the Los Angeles Times. So that's the entire gambit. That is how everybody is dealing with this. Lives have been lost. Property has been lost. Priceless artifacts, priceless monuments, things that are protected, lost. And sports has been impacted. Entertainment has been impacted. And you can bet on it. So I know I threw a lot at you guys right now, but that is what this story has brought. These type of tragedies have brought. And you see insurance companies here on WCPT, you've heard a lot about it over the last week or so, how the insurance companies are going to be reacting to this because they are multimillionaires that are losing their homes. You've heard a lot of stories about that. I think you've even heard people kind of downplay the fact because they're rich that this is okay. It's not okay. This is a straight tragedy. But staying in our world of sports, how have you thought, and I'll start with you, Marver, we're seeing that an NFL wildcard game has been moved. We know that tragedy is unavoidable, even if you're these multi-billion dollar organizations. How have you thought that the NFL has handled it, the sports world has handled it? How do you think times like this really stand out in the sports world?
Well, when there's, the tragedies, obviously you frequently have the situation in baseball where they have to move games out of Florida. There was a famous no-hitter in Milwaukee by Zambrano when that happened. So it's the right thing to do. I mean, obviously the stadium itself wasn't impacted, but the whole area around there was. So to move the game to Arizona was a no-brainer in terms of the Rams and a game against the Vikings. And, I didn't even realize that people are betting on these things. How many acres will the Palisades wildfire burned by Friday, and things of that nature? That's insane. It's bad enough that there's the gambling proliferation as it is, but it's terrible. And the famous places are going down. I mean, I was reading that they have to maybe protect the Getty Museum now, which has $1 million worth of artifacts and art. Homes, everything can be replaced except for lives. And they say like a dozen or more people have died, but I can't believe it's that low. And that's going to be the saddest of all because you can replace everything except the life.
And I think that's such a great point to hit on is the loss of life. You can't replace that. They're doing their best to contain these things. You can only be so prepared. It doesn't matter how much preparation you've done for this. There's only so much you could do to contain this type of magnitude of a natural disaster. Dev, you've seen over the last week how this is all kind of broken down, how it has impacted the sports world, the entertainment world. What were your thoughts on how the sports world has kind of handled this tragedy and how the sports fandom has been taking these fires?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, we're seeing that they have to go and move a game to another state, which understandable. I agree with all of you there. And of course, watching games this weekend, we've seen several ads for the Red Cross about the fires. NFL gives back. And of course, that's something that, I feel they have to do and they should do. And they're a multi-billion-dollar organization as a whole there. It is one of those things. It's definitely a tragedy to see the fires. I heard a story. This guy said all he could grab was his mother's ashes and his daughter's stuffed animal. And the two of them had to run out of the house. Everything's gone after that. And you see tragedy all the time. It's never easy. I hear the insurance companies. I'm like, did you guys not hear about the one that got shot a few weeks ago for doing stuff just like this? And again, I do not condone anything like that whatsoever. And here's the thing. I will say this. I have spent more money in a casino than most men spend in a strip club. I enjoy gambling. But the fact that people are gambling on tragedy makes me so dang sick. And you said this company was called
Polymarket, yeah.
Polymarket. It just shows you name anything after Paul.
Poly.
Freudian slip.
Freudian slip. That's what I get for bringing that to your attention. Goodness gracious.
Oh my goodness. I want to make fun of Paul here to lighten up the mood. I can't even do that now.
So let's be honest. And to Devin's point, I love going on DraftKings, FanDuel, Bet Rivers. If any of you would like to sponsor us, feel free. Just let us know. Send us an email at sportscubicle@gmail.com.
And if any strip clubs want to sponsor us too,
send it directly to Devin's Twitter account. So I think to me, the sad part of it is the old adage, you can bet on it. You can bet on it. Like in this country where we have just accepted the idea that betting on everything is our God-given right. That is how people consume it now. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that there's degenerates out there that will bet on loss of life, on loss of property, on damages. I think there is a certain callousness that comes from the social media era. And none of us are naive to that. We know that's how it is. But I think it is just deplorable that you can bet on this and that obviously there's no regulation because this isn't one of these official betting sites that you can do it comparative to, if you come here to Chicago, you're able to do that. Paulie, I know you and I have talked about this up mic a bunch these last few days. Is there anything that has kind of, I don't know, it disappointed you, has uplifted you, the way it's been handled, the way people have sent the messages, the way people have kind of come together to help those in need in the West Coast? What have you thought about these West Coast fires that have impacted the entire world?
The betting thing I thought was notable to mention on here, but other than that, just the impact that it's having on sports that you're seeing, the things that you don't necessarily think about, or in the things that you see. So like the things that you see, the football game, the Rams-Vikings getting moved to Arizona. We're aware of that. Everyone kind of sees that. Everyone kind of gets that. But then you hear, Lakers head coach loses his home. His family's impacted. The Golden State Warriors head coach, his mom's home is gone. She's okay, thankfully. You hear about the various universities, UCLA, Pepperdine, Loyola Marymount, they're having to reschedule games, move games, postpone games. And then individual teams like the Lakers, the Kings, they've canceled games. I'm hearing about Gary Hall Jr., an Olympic swimmer, 10 medals presumed missing that he lost in the fire, including 5 gold medals. Did I mention the PGA had a scheduled event in February at the Riviera Golf Course that's been on mandatory evacuation? So I'm assuming that we're going to find out that tournament is probably going to be canceled, maybe moved to a different course that could probably host it on short notice. I have no idea. So I mean, I think you're seeing that. And of course, the fires aren't completely contained yet. There's still, more to come, the rebuilding, what do you do from here? It's interesting. And it also, we don't have enough time in this show to kind of really totally contain and talk about the whole thing, but the fires and how they're going to be impacting sports in the future, whether it's LA or other places. We saw a few years ago, was it 90% of Australia was on fire, something ridiculous like that. Wildfires going on throughout the Western United States always. We've seen in the past, I think it was like in Seattle during the pandemic, there was like wildfires all throughout the West. And you saw this like Mariners game where there's like just a thick, smoke cloud going through the entire stadium. So with climate change, I think you're going to see a lot of these types of stories going forward. And the hope is that it's not going to impact lives and impact our wallets and impact sports, but it's a sad reality that, we really have to pay attention to and really have to work around, going forward.
Yeah. I mean, you take into consideration it's January. This doesn't happen in January.
Yeah, but it's really dry.
That's
it's a dry
point.
season.
So
yeah.
like the whole idea of like climate change, and then if you're somebody who's a conspiracy theorist, that we don't play in those fields here on the Sports Cubicle. But if you don't believe in climate change, look at if you're somebody who voted a certain way this past November, there's a reason why they want certain channel canals. There's a reason they want certain ways to impact the way they're going to make trade, because of climate change is going to make the way of that travel, the way people do business, and the way they import and exporting things are handled, and it's going to be in that avenue, and it's impacting us right now. And you've seen it here in Chicago. There's that famous picture of the guaranteed rate, and it looking like there was an orange fire right behind it because of the smoke from a few years ago from the West Coast fires, just taking control of the entire country. The entire country was just underneath fog and smoke from wildfires. We also have to take into consideration, these are top tier athletes. These are people that their bodies are their temple, and we're asking them to play in that air quality. We wouldn't let our children, ourselves, go jogging in that air quality. We're going to ask these premier athletes to go out there when they're going 100 miles an hour and to suck in all that fire air in Los Angeles. And that's kind of
and that's the nutty part is I think near the Eaton fire near Pasadena, there was like a horse track that was originally scheduling their Saturday races, but then at last minute, but they were saying like, no, the air quality meets the criteria. And that's crazy to think that they're going to have horses running in that thick of smoke and in that environment.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. The bare minimum does not mean you should do it. Now, if you're desperate and you're about to die because you haven't had a drink of water, and the water I gave you is just good enough where you won't die, sure. Doesn't mean you have to drink it though if you have a water bottle right next to you.
So are you a football coach from the 90s? What's going on?
Yeah, no, we don't drink water. That's for the weak. Water is for the weak. And that's you talk about resources. This fire, like it's going to take so much time for them to rebuild. They're going to need hopes for rain and conditions to go their way. Marbury, you were looking at something interesting.
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago where they were talking about smoke and dangerous conditions in Chicago. And I just saw it today. I was driving up from downstate and there's a smoky conditions in central Illinois warning. Smoke from the western wildfires at higher levels in the atmosphere, 5 to 6 miles aloft, are giving the sky a hazy and milky appearance. And I thought it was just going to start to rain or something, but I saw it on I-55. Up above, it was definitely smoky up in the sky. So it affects us even in Chicago. Hopefully it doesn't get down to the level that it did. I remember they were talking about people with conditions putting on masks a couple of years ago.
So this is one of those things where, like, because it's out of sight, out of mind, or you think it's so far away, it doesn't impact you. All this impacts you. It impacts your favorite sports, your entertainment, how much your gas costs. It impacts everything. And if you, at the very least, listening to us here, if you have the benefit to be able to listen to sports, watch sports, consume all of it, take some time to have the wherewithal to watch and listen to some of these stories of how they're going to impact your day-to-day, including your favorite sports team. If this was June, this would impact everybody. This would impact training camp. This would impact the Cubs. This would impact the White Sox. All this, we're all connected in some weird way, right? In that old, what do they call them, hipster way. We are all connected. This is a perfect example of that your favorite team that you don't expect is going to be impacted by what's happening in California with these fires. Now, I do also want to mention one more thing before we move on about the California fires. And in total, the sports world has become a very interesting business dynamic for tragedies, for natural disasters, the way they're impacted. If you look at the way the NFL takes advantage of hurricanes when it comes to using the Superdome or using any of these places as a facility to help those that have lost their home, these sports organizations are going to get their money no matter what. They're going to relocate these games. They're not worried about what your family's going through. They're not worried about what perception is. They need to make their money from these TV contracts. So I think it's really interesting and really important how all these teams are going to navigate the next 10, 15 years. How is Tampa Bay going to handle what they just saw with their stadium losing their roof?
Yeah.
How are teams like Arizona or the soon-to-be Vegas Athletics going to handle 120 degrees and they're using their air conditioners and generators and they don't have any water supply? How is everything going to happen in Seattle right now? These are all questions that are right there for you. You don't have to believe in climate change. You can hate Al Gore all you want. But that is right there. Watch these billionaires, how they are handling building their stadiums, their cathedrals, how they're handling these multi-billion entities that are in their portfolio as in organizations. That's how you should know better than anybody. Paulie, any final thoughts as we kind of put to rest this interesting all-around story, the tragedy, the business side of it, the way it impacts on the field, these California fires?
I think you brought up a good point. The Las Vegas and some of these other places. And I mean, I can't squeeze out any other places off the top of my head where this would be a concern. But let's just go Chicago, for instance. Yeah. What if waters raised just enough, on Lake Michigan where Soldier Field would be impacted? I think there's always environmental concerns that we have. And we live in a day and age where as gaudy as it is, we have like this oasis in the middle of the desert, like Las Vegas, where they've built that up, with the Allegiant Stadium, T-Mobile Arena, all the different casinos, whatever the Tropicana site's going to be for the Las Vegas A's, if that happens. But at the same time, it's in the middle of a desert, so it's just the environmental concerns that you always, that you don't think about with sports, but you always kind of think about in the everyday sort of thing. So I just thought that was pretty good that you brought up Las Vegas and places like that.
Yeah, don't forget Texas. And because all these teams want is expansion. What do we say? Their biggest thing is, can we make more money? And how you make more money is more teams for bigger TV contracts. So I don't care if it's 135 degrees or you're going to be somewhere in the Northeast where it's negative 20. You're playing football. Marver, any final thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I look at this last week. Atlanta is shut down in Dallas. They've had more snow than we have. It's crazy.
Dev, any final thoughts on what we saw from the California Fires and kind of the aftermath that we might see from some of these organizations, some of these leagues, some of these big entities?
I mean, we've seen how it's going. I totally forgot that the smoke from the wildfires a couple of years back impacted us. I think Paul and I were actually at a White Sox game that day. We're like, oh my goodness, it's really smoky up here in the nosebleeds. WCPT should really pay your people a little bit more. Just saying. especially in these hard times.
And for in Marver's case, can we pay him actually? No. Make sure you guys call this.
It may have had long-term effects. You could probably, sue somebody.
And that's the thing too, because we keep seeing this. They're going to keep parading people out there for as much as they can. We saw it was negative 30 last year in the Chiefs playoff game. I'm blanking on who it was. The Dolphins they're facing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, one, I don't expect anyone to go out there negative 30. Marvin and I were talking. It was Christmas Eve when the Bears had to play a negative 20. Tickets were $4. I said we should have gone. He told me I was crazy.
You are. So, but there's always the consumer too, and I think that's also important. Like, if the game were held in Inglewood, and this is a question I want to leave to the audience. Let us know at 773-763-9278. We're live on YouTube right now. Leave us a comment at the Sports Cubicle. Send us an email over at sportscubicle@gmail.com. If you missed any one of our segments and you want to hear it as an audio edition, if you're at the gym, on the train, check us out on the SoundCloud at soundcloud.com, WCPT820/tracks. If you're somebody in California, is there a fan base? If any fan base, is it just the day and age that we live in now, where if the game was held at SoFi, how many people will show up? I'd argue, just like we saw in that Kansas City versus Dolphins game, just like we will see in June, July, whether it's hurricanes or it's other fires, if a game is available and tickets are cheap enough, people will show up.
Oh, absolutely.
So saying all this and us knowing it,
pandemic, weather,
yeah,
no, I
so
mean,
is this
honestly,
all or not?
Yeah.
Is this all or not, Polly, where we're having this conversation? We want to hear from you guys, because if the game were to be held, it were a playoff game in Los Angeles, would 70,000 people show up?
The question is, would the Rams of the NFL be held liable if anyone were to get injured? Kind of what Marvin was saying, the long-term effects, could you sue? I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. I don't think it's a matter of, deterring fans from going there, that sort of thing. I think it's more when you have to pay out the lawsuits, would it just be easier just to have it in Glendale, Arizona?
So let me ask you this, Paulie, because this is a conversation that you and I, it seems like we would have had the last 10 years. So
Sure.
Is this more a thing on society today or fandom always, that if you allow them, if you build it, they will come? So just like you said, the pandemic, just like these flyers,
a little bit of both. Okay. A little bit of both. I think like nowadays, I think people are a little bit crazier and more willing to do things. But fan bases have kind of always been like that. In a way, I'm sure we can find examples. The bitter cold has never kept people away, and they still wax poetic about the ice bowl between the Cowboys and the Packers. To this day, I'm trying to think that there was like a Bears game where there was like a downstate tornado in November, and there was like a Bears Ravens game, 2013, I want to say, and the game was like heavily delayed because these like storms came through town.
That's right,
and it was still fairly full afterwards.
Bears won.
I mean, but I mean, I think a lot of people had left, but it's like, even a rain delay, sometimes it could be like a big storm going through.
Heavily delayed. The game started, and even before halftime, they had to like postpone it.
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, it's something like that. And here in Chicago, when you're on the lakefront and you see those dark clouds come in, some gnarly weather is going to come in, and Bears fans will stick around. Marvin, before we wrap things up, what do you think about this kind of like tail end of this conversation?
I was going to say, guess what? The Bears' first preseason game was stopped due to weather, if you recall, in Canton, Ohio. So, I mean, that's meaningless, of course.
But what do you think, though? Well, like, that's family destinations, a vacation. You're right. Canton, Ohio. People go there for vacation. It's a bad storm. Do you think if it were a bigger game, right, like say a regular season game, same conditions, do the same amount of people sell out Soldier Field? Or anywhere?
The only difference might be is they might evacuate and then continue. I mean, that would be the minimum they would do.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you see that at baseball, they keep playing the game and the fans have been told to move from the lower level.
Or you see a baseball game where that day it's going to be 100 degrees, 105 degrees, and fans still show up.
Yeah.
Wrigley Field's U.S. South side, like you see it all the time in July.
You'll see that with Tampa. They'll be playing outside this year in the Yankees minor league stadium.
And it gets hot. Everybody knows here, you get down to that central and then southern part of Florida, it is hot come summertime. So, and muggy. So it's going to be gnarly for Tampa Bay Ray fans for the first time having that experience. Devin, to kind of wrap this all up, what did you think about kind of our little tangent on sports fans and kind of how they involve in this whole situation? Would they show up to Inglewood, to SoFi, if they were allowed to, even with these fires going on?
I'm going to ask you guys, how many times do we watch a game that's in Buffalo and it's snow and you see the big fat dude with no shirt on swinging?
Frozen tundra.
Or the Buffalo when it snows and it's like, hey, come to the stadium with a shovel and like hundreds of people show up.
And you don't even get a ticket. You just get to do it. They have grip to that. But I guess this is the thing too, is people that are from the Northeast, from like Buffalo, from Chicago, Wisconsin, Minnesota, we take this pride in the cold and snow. So I think we kind of see a less danger in it, even though it's just as dangerous as anything to lose a finger in frostbite. But don't you think the optics of it too is a little bit different, where like you're asking somebody in Buffalo, hey, go to a snow game, opposed to, hey, drive where if you look on your left, it looks like hell on Earth.
But I'm just saying, we've seen that in so many things here. And that's the thing. It's like you said, you build it, they will come. People, again, we talk about sports here. There's some people who take it more serious than us. Show hands here. Who has their favorite team's logo tattooed anywhere on their body in this room? Okay, good. We're not
crazy. Shout out to fans though. I mean, you got to love their.
I'll give the super fans that, but you see this. How many times do people it's like especially in college sports, they travel across the country just to see their team play, and that's the way it is. They're going to find a way. They're going to do it no matter come hell and high water because they want to see their favorite team take the playoffs, win that game. Plus, tickets are expensive and always non-refundable here. And these hard times, do you really want to blow your money? Almost a bad word.
That's all right. Marver, give us a quick update.
10-0 still Philly. We're coming up and halfway through the third, about 9 minutes in the third.
And the Bears still don't have a head coach.
No, not yet.
We want to hear your thoughts. Let us know. A quick suggestion. If you're looking to donate, obviously the Red Cross, but kids are going to need school supplies. Kids are going to need jackets. People are going to need underwear and socks. Highly suggest you guys find your favorite charitable your favorite charity that donates those type of things, that are donating to the victims of the wildfire. A lot of people have lost a lot of valuable things, but not just valuable things, essential things. So I highly suggest you look for your favorite charity to take care of our people out on the West Coast. Call us at 773-763-9278. We're on YouTube at The Sports Cubicle. Send us an email at sportscubicle@gmail.com. If you want to hear to the audio version, we're on soundcloud.com/WCPT820/tracks if you missed any one of our segments. He's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. He's Paul Shivari. Devin Tingle is on the board. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. The Chicago Bulls are good, bad, indifferent? Yes. Lonzo Ball is actually an interesting story. I want to talk about Lonzo Ball. We did talk about some White Sox, some Cubs, and a whole lot more. The last half an hour of the Sports Cubicle coming up next here on WCPT 820 and HeartlandSignal.com.
Welcome to the Inclusive Voice with your host, Pam McElvain. Get some coffee, and here we have our leaders and trailblazers this morning that we're going to have a conversation once again about impactful change. We've come so far with race and racism in America, but we have so much further to go when you think about some of the racial incidents that we witnessed in our country, like slavery, civil rights, to the death of George Floyd and so many others.
The Inclusive Voice with Pam McElvain. Saturday at 7 a.m.
You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn Radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnights, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter. WCPT Replay.
I am so excited to say good morning to Heather Cox Richardson, a professor, historian. What the Trump administration promises to put in power is not popular. It is not a popular set of policies at all. Project 2025, when people actually know about it, they turn against it in huge numbers. Similarly, we know that anybody who accurately assesses the facts of our country sides with the Democrats overwhelmingly. Yeah. It's not even, people keep talking about it being a leftist agenda or a progressive agenda. Honest to God, what Harrison Walz wanted was very much to the right of Dwight Eisenhower in the 1950s, who was a Republican. Yeah. So we're not talking about about destroying the United States and destroying the government in order to put in place a leftist government. We are talking about holding back fascism. And that's something that we should all be able to get behind.
Keep listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
We are keeping things rolling here on the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, here with Paul Shivari, Devin Tingle, and the marvelous one, Dan Marver. Give us a call at 773-763-9278. Check out the YouTube channel. Subscribe to us. Give us a like at the Sports Cubicle. Email us at sportscubicle@gmail.com. If you missed any one of our segments and you want to listen to it at the gym, on the train, on your way home, check us out at soundcloud.com/WCPT820/tracks. So one of the uplifting stories that I wanted to talk about, and it's something that I have to quote on this very show, I said Lonzo Ball would never play another NBA basketball game for the Chicago Bulls. Not only was I disproven, not only did Lonzo shove it in my face, he is now starting once again for the Chicago Bulls, starting today against the now DeMar DeRozan-led Sacramento Kings.
It's already over. The Kings won.
There we go. And I think beyond this, because I think this Bulls season's kind of a wash, it doesn't really matter. They should be going for draft picks. This roster is kind of a mess the way it's built. There are some things, Marver and I have talked about it for years. There are some things we do like, some things we don't like. But one thing I do love is what we've seen from Lonzo Ball off the court. For those of you who don't know, it was his third meniscus surgery. And it got to the point where they had to do a transplant, one of the first of its kind. And I believe it was from a dead body. What is the proper sign? A cadaver?
Stem cells or from a
cadaver.
Yeah.
So this is something that has never been done before. And we've seen videos of him and people mocking him, including Stephen A. Smith, of him not being able to get up and down from a chair. Now we are seeing this man from this surgery we've never seen before, starting in the NBA. And not just starting as a nice story, a favor done by the Chicago Bulls, so that for his perseverance and for him doing all this, he's earned the right to be a starter again. He's worked on his three-point shot over the last 5 years to become a prolific three-point shooter. The Bulls brought in Lonzo Ball years ago because they believe that he can control this offense, control this pace, get the ball to Zach LaVine, get the ball to DeMar DeRozan. When you had Alex Caruso doing all the intangible things, they thought they had themselves a top-tier point guard in this league, and injuries completely derailed what could have been a very promising run for this Bulls team. But unlike other injuries, like we saw with one of my favorite players of all time, Brandon Roy, where he just didn't have any cartilage in those knees anymore, we've seen Lonzo Ball overcome all that and dunk in an NBA game, cut in an NBA game, run a fast break in an NBA game. I don't care if this team gets to a plan. I don't care. I would love if they get Cooper Rush or if they get Cooper Flagg. That would be great. But I don't care about anything else. The Bulls season to me is a wash. It's whatever. You got to move on from Zach LaVine. We'll get to that in a second. But Lonzo Ball is an inspiration. And 10 years from now, when the surgery gets better, and there's players in this league that are so explosive still after major knee surgery, we will look back to what Lonzo Ball meant to the NBA long-term. Paulie, what did you think about this? I mean, let's take away all the stuff from the Ball family, the Triple B, all that. Lonzo has been a great professional, as legitimately a professional. Maybe not on the court, the stats will say, but as a pro, he's been a pro.
Mm-hmm.
His recovery, getting back on the court, people like myself who I always give the benefit, I did not think he would be able to come this type of medical just avalanche of injuries that he had to deal with. What did you think about seeing Lonzo start again and kind of what he's meant to people, not just on the Bulls, but for the league as an inspiration.
It's inspiring seeing him come back. Like you were saying, I was with you. I didn't think he'd ever come back, or if he did, he'd be a shell of a player, be out of the league fairly quickly, maybe be a G League or international type of player, join his brother over in Lithuania or whatever.
Yeah.
Although his brother's coming back, I want to say LaMelo, but yeah, I didn't think that Lonzo would make an impact, and it was clear that he made a huge impact on the team before he got injured, and they arguably were never the same after he got injured. They kind of middling in the play-in game sort of territory where I think he kind of got them a little bit over the hump. But the Bulls are an absolute mess nowadays. And you were mentioning that they got to move on from Zach LaVine, which is big right now. With Ball coming back, perhaps that maybe provides a chance for a new look. If you get rid of a LaVine, maybe you can kind of build around Kobe White and Ball going forward. It's sad because we talk about this all the time, with the Bulls being the fan base that they have, the stadium that they have, the legacy that they have, just the fact that year after year they're mediocre trash all the time. It's time to blow it up and do something. And I don't care if that's
owner they have.
Perhaps there's some to that. Michael has more input though than Jerry does.
And I think sometimes with the NBA, though, it's just such a star-driven league that it's just they never were able to attract some of the bigger guys. The big star, like the DeRozan, Levine.
It wasn't number one seed.
Yeah.
It wasn't number one seed until everybody got hurt. To your point, it was working until it wasn't working.
Yeah. I don't know. And that was just basically my thing. It's like it's stale, so it's just time to blow it up. Vucevic is having a great season, but almost you got to strike while the iron's hot and just start over.
Yeah, and you and I have been on that a long time. You've been the one who's been really
blow it up.
Yeah. Marvin,
otherwise, they're gonna be number 10 every year.
And you don't want there's no point of being a number 10. It's not the NFL where because you're in it, you can win it. No, you in the NBA, you need to be a top 4 and you need to have top superstars. And I like enough Giddey. I like Kobe enough, but you need to move on from Vooch. You need to move on from Zach. And Marvin, you and I have had this conversation for years now, from the time when Lonzo first got hurt, from when DeMar was an MVP type of player the first half of that season 3 years ago at this point, from the Zach LaVine, will he go, won't he go? Where are you on where the Bulls kind of stand right now in the standings? And what I feel is more importantly, the triumphant return of Lonzo Ball.
Well, the Ball star is amazing, and I really think that Stephen A. Smith was really offline when he was making fun of him that he couldn't even stand up and all this, so he should be eating crow for his comments early on. But right now the Bulls are 18-21. They're in the same place they always are, 10th place. I mean, in the Western Conference they wouldn't even be in 10th because Golden State's 19-19 in 10th place. But and Philadelphia's on their heels. They're a game and a half from not even qualifying for the play-in. So it's clear that something should happen here. They were able to beat the worst team in the league, Washington, which was good. It was only won 6 games. So obviously,
but I want to say one of Washington's 6 wins was against the Bulls a few weeks ago.
Right. And so it's unbelievable the Ball star. I mean, in 21-22, he played in the 35 games, averaged 13 points, 5.1 assists, 42% on 3-pointers. So, and they had a really good record at that point, and they haven't had a really good record since then, actually. So, he had a cartilage transplant in March 2023, third operation in little more than a year. And then, of course, he had the new meniscus to go with the cartilage transplant, and then a bone allograft, where you're talking about the replacement bone came from another person, actually.
There you go. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's one of the first in its kind where they're grafting bones from cadavers.
Yeah, I don't know. Was it another living person?
The way he's playing right now, and this is what amazes me about that injury and why I'm maybe so fixated on it. It's not just that he overcame the injury and that he's playing again. It's what is this surgery, this procedure going to mean for sports?
Is he the Tommy John for basketball knees?
Yeah. And what does that mean for future stars? There's going to be a star 10, 15 years from now that we don't know of, that's playing in AAU ball, that's going to have this procedure, that his stardom is saved because of this. Marvin, I need an update on the Philadelphia Green Bay game.
Field goal, Green Bay 10-3, 5:46 to go in the third. Back to you.
And I also wanted to throw one team about the Bulls. This team has been looking for a point guard since Derrick Rose. And it's not just trying to, find the things in the stars.
Are we counting Jimmy, or is he a shooting guard?
Jimmy was more like that point forward type
of team. Before we get to
and that was not Jimmy, that Jimmy's not.
Jimmy wants out of Miami. clear as day.
Yes.
Levine is going to cost a pretty penny, so he's hard to move.
Yes.
Is there something to a straight up trade as long as straight up with maybe some money to balance it out?
I would think in some.
And do the Bulls want to be reunited with Jimmy Butler?
I don't think either one of these teams wants either one of those players, including the teams that they play for.
And does Butler even want to go to a Bulls?
No, I think Zach LaVine wants to be your 3 or 4 for a team that's going to be in the playoffs in the Western Conference.
I think LaVine would fit with the Heat.
I think LaVine will fit with a lot of teams.
Yeah.
I think LaVine will fit great as a number 3 or 4 in a lot of teams.
But money-wise, he's too much, I think, for what role
and what
teams would want him for.
And not just, and what you want back. Not just in money, but like in assets, in draft capital. And I think somebody like Jimmy wants to go where he can not only rub it in the face of the Miami Heat, but he wants to be an alpha. Zach LaVine could be an alpha in his mind while still being the 3. So it's two dynamics that are very interesting because they're both very dynamic and very explosive in what they bring to the table. When they're bringing it to the table, it's just what do they fit for a team that's trying to win a championship? Like imagine a Zach LaVine with a Denver Nuggets or a team that's like high pace, high volume, able to get a lot of shots up, and also having superstars are ready to take that load off of him. So I want to know to you though, Devin, because Lonzo Ball, inspirational story, great for him, doesn't really mean anything for wins or losses. But Zach LaVine also on this roster going to be moved. Nikola Vucevic going to be moved. I know your trepidation and your frustration with the Reinsdorf-owned team, but it being Michael Reinsdorf, it being Mark Eversley and Arturas Karnisovas running this thing, Billy Donovan on the coaching staff. It is a competent ran organization when it comes to everybody if you want to take Jerry out of the situation, because I do trust Michael more than Jerry when it comes to the Bulls. Your thoughts on kind of what's going on over at the Madhouse on Madison?
Yeah, but to go back to that, they came out that Jerry Reinsdorf said keep the team just good enough, and we've lost 3 or 4 play-in games in a row at this point. If that doesn't sound like a team that's just good enough, I don't know what is here. Again, we've been talking about the Zach LaVine trade or trading Zach LaVine since I think the time the Bulls got him, or since we got this show. It's always been a topic of interest. And it's a matter of when are they going to finally pull the trigger? When his contract's finally up and you're just forcing not even have him on the team anymore? Of course not. They'll find a way to re-sign him. Let's be real here. We know Jerry spends money when he absolutely has to, but just it's at the point where it's like, what does this team want to be? Does it want to continue to be just good enough and lose the play-in game year in and or year after year after year? I'm sorry here. And that's just my frustration because you say, oh, it's Michael Reinsdorf. This kind of feels like a Jerry Reinsdorf team to the T.
I think that's it. It is a legit worry if you're somebody who always is looking for the Jerry Reinsdorf interference and the Jerry Reinsdorf isms that you might see from a team that is ran by him. I do think that there's a different type of TLC that is taken between the two organizations. I do think Jerry loves the Chicago White Sox. I think he cares what the Chicago White Sox are doing. I think he loves that his son loves that the Bulls do this. Like, what is the old adage? You remember better. He would trade all his NBA championships for another World Series.
Yeah.
So it's not like
for one World Series ring,
so
which he got it already.
Yeah. So Jerry loves the White Sox more than the Bulls, even though he could love them both. It's like picking your favorite child. If you're the Bulls, I think looking for the future, you got to look at the landscape of the NBA. If you can't get the number 1 overall pick, then you need to get a superstar. And I've been telling Marver in our segments over the years that the Chicago Bulls have always done one thing poorly, and that's setting themselves up for when a superstar is disgruntled and you can make a move. Year after year after year, the Bulls put themselves in position to be just good enough to be a 10th seed, a 9th seed, an 8th seed. They play good defense. They hustle. But when a name like, Anthony Edwards becomes available in a year or two, they have no draft capital. They have no salary cap space, so they can't make a move. Good teams look 2, 3, 4 years down the road. Superstar teams that win championships know that. The Chicago Bulls have constantly either finished in second place because they have no idea how to recruit a young NBA athlete and never have. Ask Tracy McGrady, ask LeBron James, ask Tim Duncan, ask Kevin Garnett. The list goes on and on and on and on. They don't know how to do this. If the Bulls are ever going to do what matters the most in that organization and win championship number 7, post Michael Jordan, they have to get a superstar. And I promise you, there are plenty of disgruntled superstars in the NBA if you put yourself in the right position. But right now, what can the Bulls do if Anthony Edwards is available? If Minnesota comes to you right now and says, here, Give us your best assets. They can't offer a top-tier draft pick. They can't offer an up-and-coming star. They can't offer all these great expiring contracts. So once again, they have played themselves in a position where they have to hope for a miracle. And hoping is not a strategy. It's not a plan. And too many times in this city, we have seen that from organizations, from front offices, and specifically this Bulls team. But I want to bring up something really fast, and I want to wrap it up because I do want to hit the north and south side on the diamond. But Paulie, I see that you found something a little interesting about the Bulls front office and kind of how everything is being handled.
Well, yeah, I mean, so we don't talk about their front office nowadays as much as we talked about the previous regime of, Gar Forman and John Paxson. But Arturas Karnisovas has been with the Bulls long enough now where is he kind of on the hot seat. If they get through this trade deadline and they get through the season and it's still going to the playoff game or missing the playoffs and you've got the same roster, do you blow it up there too from the front office?
Marver, really fast before we get your thoughts wrapped up on the Bulls, I need a quick update on what is happening in Philadelphia as the Packers take on the Eagles. It looks like we might have an update.
Yeah, it's still 10-3 late in we're almost going to be in the fourth quarter pretty soon.
Yeah, it looks like we have a tight end scored.
Here we go. Okay, now it's 17. Okay.
There you go.
But
So
you got to wake me up.
So for
we have 3:20 to go in the third. Okay.
Barber, Bulls thoughts. What do you wrap this thing up?
Today Levine scored another 36, but DeRozan scored 21, and the Kings beat them. So I don't know. Since the first of the year, it looks like he's increased his worth. And I think the deadline is February 6th for the trade. And so that's coming up in a couple, 2-3 weeks. So I think that this will be the time to make that move. I think the Lakers are interested in him, maybe some other teams. I don't know who else, but
the Nets maybe.
The Nets, yeah, but the Lakers might be a good place for him, actually. So I don't know. It's the thing's gonna happen this year. They might as well, because since he's averaged over 32 points and 60% shooting in the 2025 games, he's played 6 games. So he's averaged 5 assists and almost 5 rebounds. So he said very simply, if you're not at that level, they wouldn't talk about you at all. I've done a lot better this year of just canceling out a lot of the noise. So. He's going to be moved. And right now, the Bulls are not going to be in the top, 6. So 7, 8, 9, 10 is a play-in. So if they hang in there, it'll be playing city again, just like the last 2 years.
And it's just more of the same. And it's basketball hell for the Chicago Bulls if they don't do the thing that they constantly are doing, which is just being a mid-NBA basketball team. Devin, you have any final thoughts? Because I think it's time we hit the diamond.
Why do you want to torture me by going to the other Jerry Reinsdorf owned team?
Yeah, really.
All right, I promise you we'll end with the Jerry Reinsdorf team really fast. This is from Patrick Mooney. The Chicago Cubs could be heading toward an arbitration hearing against Kyle Tucker, which they did go to, and the team was off by $2 million because the Cubs filed at $15 million per ESPN, while Tucker's group countered at $17.5 million. And Tucker could enjoy the Wrigley Field experience, but it would make sense for him to explore his future options. The 15-year, $765 million contract that the New York Mets gave Juan Soto this offseason likely raised expectations. And even if Tucker's next contract lands on a smaller scale than Soto's, to this point, the Cubs have not demonstrated much eagerness to make that kind of long-term superstar level commitment. Check out the entire article by Patrick Mooney over at The Athletic and New York Times, as the Cubs and Kyle Tucker are heading towards arbitration, $2 million apart from each other. And this is my thesis on the entire situation going on Chicago baseball. You can't win games without talent. And too often, and I'm going to go for the Cubs specifically, you are hoping people exceed the back of the baseball card. You are hoping that you can rehab a pitcher to becoming an ace. You are hoping that your farm system can carry the load when your veterans can't. You are going into next season with a shortstop and second baseman that both are coming off surgery. This team has no offensive firepower. They got rid of their first baseman / MVP candidate. And you're over here petty over $2 million. You don't have to tell me what your goals are as an organization. I told a friend of the show, Rich Eberwine, weeks back, this Cubs front office, no matter if Carter Hawkins or Jed Hoyer are fighting for a contract, are playing for not this CBA, but for the next one. The Ricketts family is more worried about saving face on Sammy Sosa, which they have absolutely no qualms about. They should have no worries about. They are hypocrites for that. They were fans when Sammy was making that team a $3 billion organization, that they could build that cathedral of Addison and that entire neighborhood. But they're worried about arbitration with a stud that can help their team in a weak division. There is no excuse for this organization to act the way they have. And for the first interaction you have with your future superstar is to fight at arbitration. Tell me, without telling me, what your real thoughts are on what you see your franchise going now and into the new CBA a few years from now. Paulie, you could go with the Cubs, you go with the White Sox. I think it's frustrating that we are seeing this. I'm not telling you to go get Juan Soto, but you have your superstar in-house. Take care of it now.
Yeah, that's interesting that they would trade for him after having, trading for Isaac Paredes in the middle of the offseason.
Who was under contract,
had team control, fairly good contract. They trade him to try and get Kyle Tucker. I get that Tucker's still on his original deal. So yes, there is arbitration, but it makes me wonder why they didn't try and do a contract extension in the offseason, what that would be all about. And then, both you and Rich, and I've heard other Cubs fans and writers, insiders say that can't be just the only move they make, the Kyle Tucker move. There's going to be a bigger one. And I saw them attached to Roki Sasaki, the Japanese pitcher that was posted and should be picking a team anytime soon. But it seems like the Padres and the Dodgers seem to be the favorites that Sasaki would go to. So then the Cubs, they signed Colin Ray, probably going to be pitching in like a swing sort of role with them, reunited with Craig Counsell as manager in Milwaukee. But it makes you wonder, is this going to be it for the Cubs? Is that the type of stuff they're doing? And then, Devin, you're going to love this because this is how I'm going to transition to the White Sox. A player that the Cubs are actually interested in because they do need a third baseman is Yohan Moncada. They're realistically tied to Yohan Moncada,
which I'm not upset about. Yohan Moncada,
he'll come cheap. Yes, I think he was, it's going to be under $5 million,
but it's not inspiring. It's not inspiring.
No, it's not inspiring. And the crazy part, though, is just think of how crazy it would be if Moncada, switch hitting third baseman, has a redemption season with the Cubs. What a slap in the face that would be to the White Sox, because could the Cubs turn him around and get 1 year out of him? But that's an interesting thing. I've always thought the Cubs have been in an interesting position where they can spend money, they can try and go after guys, but they really aren't going after those guys. And you're saying that they're playing for the next CBA, which is after this next season, the following season. They did this the last time, and they didn't keep Kyle Schwarber when the NL went all DH, and that would have been a beneficial player for them. So I don't know. I went from thinking that the Cubs are sly as foxes because they're not overspending, but at the same time, it's in a very winnable division, and they're not getting wins out of that division, and they kind of be sleeping and not developing, and they really could arguably be the class of the NL Central with a couple of moves and spending a few dollars and doing this correctly.
Marvelous. Yeah. We are going to let Devin finish the show on his White Sox side. So we'll go to the north side really fast, jumping off what Paul said and myself. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Matt Shaw is going to be the third baseman for the Cubs is the plan. To maybe they can hit another home run like Bush at first base. But the good news is they did get Justin Steele, $6.55 million salary. So he agreed to arbitration. It is like peanuts, when you talk about Soto is getting 15-year, $765 million. I mean, 15 million, 17.5 million. What's the big deal with just give them the 17.5? I mean, Tucker, of course. So, I mean, it's a funny thing is they're going to be reporting to spring training in about 6 weeks?
6 weeks. Yep.
Yeah. Crazy. So here we are. And that's, once again, we'll be able to talk baseball pretty soon. So crazy.
And it's unfortunately the baseball I don't want to be talking about though. I want to be talking about your team doing the right thing, building the right roster, having a strong pitching rotation, letting the season play out the way it is. Not that you have a depleted roster or not a talent enough to win at a weak NL Central, but because the other teams got to your level. Devin, go right ahead.
On what exactly? How it's just a dumpster fire in the city of Chicago when it comes to sports?
They've got Martin Perez and Josh Rojas coming now to the team.
Yeah, and they've signed a million other minor league.
I do like their manager.
Mark Burley is going to be showing up to Sox Fest Live.
Let's go.
Ball to Mark Burley. My childhood is over. And this is just what I am seeing right now here because it's just so funny. It's like the Cubs and Jed Hoyer saw what the White Sox were doing for so long. They're like, we can do it too. And people will still show up because they want to party. No one wants to party at the good old rate field. I almost saw the guaranteed in front of it, but they had to go and make it more dumb again. Probably the best move they could do, though, with all these just garbage they are seeing here. I am just hearing so much about the White Sox. Don't download the ESPN app on your phone. By the way, Andrew Vaughn just took a Nels Healthy dump. I got that notification 5 minutes ago because all they do is notify you. And the White Sox have been signing minor league player after minor league player after minor league player to minor league deals. And Paul and I both know come June, we'll probably see them on the starting roster here because when you lose 121 games, the next season your goal is to lose less than that. And let's be real here, it's a feat that is so hard to do once, but I wouldn't put it past this garbage team. Jerry, chef's kiss, mwah, you get what you deserve. And I cannot wait to see this team suck even more because, again, the thing about the Cubs is they have potential. People should want to come and play for the Cubs. No one in their right mind should want to play for the White Sox.
Put the jacket back on.
I call into question your Andrew Vaughn thing because he's never consistent and regular.
Okay, and that's
we've got an update. So there was no extra point made by the Eagles, so it's 16-3. But now it looks like the Packers might be scoring right now. It might be 16-9 in a second here.
All right, let's end this show before the Packers have a chance to win it too tight this game.
So that people can go watch the game.
Yeah, and in our lore, they never actually came.
Hey, so this is going to be played again at 9:00 tonight. So if you're hearing this right now, it could be 9:00 at night, and you're hearing this, or you could be hearing this right now, and you'll hear it again at 9:00. But next week will be the final week that we're live at 4 p.m. The management has heard your complaints. Yep. They're getting rid of us after next week. Yep. Our days are numbered, and the family meeting will be back in 2 weeks.
And we want to say thank you to each and every one of you who has joined us these last few weeks, including those who haven't enjoyed our voices. We love you even more than everybody else. Make sure we're always interactive. Go to the YouTube channel at The Sports Cubicle. Subscribe to us over there. Leave a comment. We are always looking to have conversations with the amazing people that listen to us here on The Sports Cubicle. Send us an email over at sportscubicle@gmail.com. If you missed any one of our interviews, any one of the segments, and want to listen to it while you're driving, at the gym, on the train, wherever the case may be, go to soundcloud.com/WCPT820/tracks. For the marvelous one, Dan Marver, for Paul Shavari, for Devin Tingle, who was on the board taking the phone calls. Thank you, three boys, so much. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us here on the Sports Cubicle. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday night. Enjoy the rest of the playoff games. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We will see you next week on the final January edition of the live Sports Cubicle here on WCPT 820 and HeartlandSignal.com.
If you're interested in buying a home in the near future and you're looking for a real estate professional that's going to have your back, we bring them on the air right here at the Home Buyers Hour every Saturday.